So, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the final round of this workshop. And we have foreseen to have a panel discussion, which at the same time should serve as a kind of wrap-up in terms of the key messages that you may wish to retain for the decades to come out of this workshop. We have heard a lot over the past 2 days about how we can augment actually what we are doing in official statistics to embed new data sources and to increase, let's say, and modernize the value of what we do by partnering and reaching out to holders of new data sources. And we have also heard a lot about what this is entail in terms of difficulties, challenges, but also opportunities and areas to invest further, including privacy-preserving mechanisms, even legislation was mentioned, and a whole bunch of technological work that is ahead of us. My first question goes to Anastasios and Rob, and I'd like to hear a little bit from you, your views and based on your experience of what do you consider the recommendations, the do's and don'ts, so to say, for statisticians in terms of partnering. And partnering on the one hand side with owners of private data sources and on the other hand side with citizens. And I'm happy to hearing your views. Anastasios, would you like to start?
Thank you. So your question has two segments. The first refers to the private organizations that may offer data to be used by statisticians, and the other is regarding the individuals. For the first case, I think that at least you have, or the whole system should support three prerequisites. The first is that the whole procedure must be easy. For example, you have to provide some ready solutions for tackling the GDPR labyrinth. The second is that the data that you request should be parsimonious. I think that Fabio gave some ideas regarding this. You should not ask for more data than those that you need. In many cases, this means that you should not request the transfer of any data at all. You need to collect information, not data. And the third issue that should be tackled is that the whole procedure should be attractive. Attractive not only for the statistician's part, also for the partnering organizations. This, for example, can be done by providing mechanisms that can offer value to the statistical product, value that will be exploitable by the same organizations. Regarding the individuals now, the first is to promote privacy preservation. The individuals are very willing to hear, at least, that everything is in privacy. The second approach that should be incorporated according to our experience from our project BigO is that it helps very much if you can embed the whole procedure in everyday life procedures that are already in place. For example, we collect data from students. If the procedure can be combined with courses or projects that are running in the schools, this is something that helps a lot. The third is the co-design issue. Probably you know the idea of participatory design. This is an older idea that was used by urban designers and can be embedded and increased in the collection of data that are used locally, not only for the purpose of general statistics, data that can be used for improving my neighborhood, my school. Relevant to this, related to this, is the direct return of the statistics. For example, can drivers benefit from providing their data in order to improve the way that they go to their destination? Is it possible? And the final one is the financial incentives. We know that most of the population, 70% according to a recent survey, are willing to provide physical activity data if they get a reduction in the insurance fee.
Thank you, Anastasios. That was very rich. Nevertheless, I'm convinced that Rob, with his perspective, can add something here. Please, what do you think?
My first observation is I need to improve my writing so that I can read what I jot down. So I think we're dealing with the private organisations. So maybe some of the lessons just from personal experience would be to get as high as possible inside of the organisation, and if you can get agreement at the top level, it tends to percolate down and it becomes a lot easier. So I think that would be a starting point. Things like inviting onto advisory boards, onto advisory networks, so that they become stakeholders in the initiative, and that also helps to build a joint epistemic community. So you're all kind of start to kind of understand each other and believe in the same kinds of things and move in the same kind of direction. I agree around the issue around being attractive. So highlighting what they get out of the arrangement. A lot of these organisations are data users themselves, and they look to get insights out of data, and they make decisions about where to locate their offices and their factories and everything else from it. So the better public data is, then the better that will guide their own operations and their own strategic planning. There's other win-win things around a kind of joint promotion of each other's work, and so on, co-creation of best practices and of processes. Also think of things that you can offer them as well. So things like help with evaluating data quality, data management practices, data processes, building capacity jointly in terms of expertises, or sharing out, as in the last presentation, of dividing out tasks. There's the potential to explore things like the possibility of validated data markets, for example. So there's a thing around kind of validation services, I think. There are some opportunities around things like the smart cities initiatives, or anything that involves private companies working with public agencies. So I guess this is a channel through public agencies rather than direct to private companies. But the public sector is a huge procurer of private services, and so through the rules of engagement, through the procurement, you can potentially set down how you would like to work. So, for example, one of the conditions of a procurement contract for delivery of a particular smart city technology might be that the data comes back, for example. So it's kind of mandated within the... Now, there are examples of that. So Transport for London, for example, actively directs all the private procurement that it does in terms of what data it can collect, who it can share it with, where it can store it, what value it can extract from it, and so on. It's not simply that they can go off and do what they like. They can set those terms, and if one of the terms is that the data comes back to the state for official statistics, then that can be embedded in. I don't think that's a channel that's really been explored, but there's lots of other parts of the public government who are interfacing with these companies. That might be an avenue to look with. So it's actually working with public sector companies as opposed to directly with the private companies. So I guess building a partnership with other players. The don'ts are: don't try and move without any consultation, don't take without reciprocating, don't proceed without looking at co-creation options, basically. I think the public, is a bit more tricky in that it's partly around trust. it's partly about sharing information, and it's partly about respecting GDPR and the Fair Information Practice principles. But in general, the way that we get public information is actually through third parties. It's actually through the insurance companies, or it's through we don't really get data direct from citizens in many examples. And if we do, it tends to be very small samples and they're not representative. So that's a difficulty, I think. So I think a lot of the stuff around public is actually really about the private to a certain degree.
Great, thank you very much for helping us setting our future agenda. I think that were indeed very rich recommendations. In a second round, I would like to invite Bernard and Markus to shed some light on the role of statisticians when it comes to the standard setting work. And in particular, now that I think we have seen today and yesterday that things have advanced to some extent in terms of standards, in particular in the urban areas. We have seen some concrete examples, but we have also heard that there is still a high degree of, let's say, heterogeneity, and further standard setting can be very beneficial. With the specific portfolio and the specific also qualifications of statisticians, where do you see good entry points for us? Bernard, would you like to start? And then Markus, perhaps to also shed some light on these questions.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think there are a few topics, domains, where I can see definitely a real added value and even more engagement of the statistical authorities. First of all, we have seen from the presentation from Fabio that we have more and more sources of data. And there is definitely a need, and my perception is that for the statistical authorities, it would be very key to be the unique statistical data providers, but also as the spine for official reporting, monitoring, but also starting to have some analysis and alert about deviations from what could be expected. So that's the first point. The second point, again, we have more and more data, and a lot of the data are put or feeding some benchmark. And as I said also in my presentation this morning, it will be extremely key to have the skills, the competence from the statisticians for, let's say, validating the data analysis as well as the interpretation we have. And also finally, as we have seen, and now we are moving to this interconnection of things, IoT, artificial intelligence, etc. There is definitely a need for robust and harmonized statistics to feed the algorithms. And that's, again, something very important for the statistic authorities. My last point is also in line with what Fabio said before. You understand that I see an increased role of the statistical authorities, but also big challenge, like moving from what you are doing today to what I can call dynamic statistics. And this is related to these new type of data sources Fabio explained before. That's a challenge, but it will also ensure trust and confidence in the statistics that will be presented and also appropriated by any people, any citizens.
Yeah, thanks. I noticed 2 points I want stressed out, but after Bernard's presentation and remarks, I have a third point. My first point is what will be the role of official statistic in the age of IoT? I think IoT are not the only data we have. We still will have survey data. And as official statistic, we have access to administrative data. And the full value of non-traditional data, new digital data, is in the combination of all these data sources, and to use these data sources in a combination. And that is something what we can do in official statistics. We have the experience to run surveys, also bigger surveys. And here in Germany, we had in our last census a combination of administrative data and survey data. And I believe in 10 years we will run census with also to add then new, non-traditional data to that. Another important issue from my point of view is that still we have the task to bring quality and concepts in producing statistics. What we get from IoT and other non-traditional data is not exactly that what we want to observe. So we need model-based statistics to really come to the variables what we have in mind for analyzing. For example, population, added value. That is not what we direct get from new data sources. So we have transformed the data. We need concepts. We need definitions, and that will be still a part and a task of a statistician. And third point, and you raised that in your presentation and also in your remarks, Bernhard, interpretation. You see the rule of official statistics also in the interpretation of the data, of the results. And that is a long discussion in official statistics. Should we analyze our own data? The most view long time was we are a neutral data producer and not the data analyst. And that is still an open question. Should we more engaged in analyzing our own data? We have an understanding of this data, but we would go then in competition to institutes. And for that, we have to discuss it.
Thank you very much. I think we still have a couple of minutes for a last round, and I suggest we go in reverse order and start with Markus. And what I would like to ask all of you is, I mean, today's conference, or today's and yesterday's conference was about trusted smart statistics, policy making in the area of the Internet of Things, and from smart devices to actually using such data for policy making, there is one important step in between, which is to add exactly that trust stamp. What is needed in order to arrive from A to B, so to say? Please.
Yeah, that was part of our conclusion in our presentation yesterday, the experience what we did in this project, Smart Business Cycle Statistics, that we have identified 3 parts of work. One part is the data engineering job, really to transform signals or the bits from the images, the pixel from the images into information or into figures. For that, we need data scientists who can write the algorithm to transform this signal into a number. Then the next step is, and that will still the task of an official statistician or of a statistician, is the conception and the quality aspect, really to understand the figures, to develop a sample design making for parking places, which parking places should be used when we don't know what is the whole population, all question linked to that. And at the end, we have the part of the data visualization, dashboards. We had a wonderful presentation today to that. 3 parts of work, and I believe we will do official statistics in the future, trusted official statistics in work sharing. We need partners outside of the statistical family, of the official statistical family, sometimes also institution, government institution. That is our experience with our National Space Agency, but also private enterprises, private companies, and in collaboration we will produce statistics. And what we need then are rules for the interfaces. We need a kind of code of practice, what is necessary to include data maybe coming from private companies into the statistical production process that we can say at the end of the day, this is official statistic with the quality what we expect from our products.
Thank you. Bernard, please.
Yes, just a few points also related to what we already discussed this morning and this afternoon also. I think I see really a need for common languages, common terminology, common definitions. And it was again reminded by Fabio before. There is also a need to have this kind of standardized data collection protocol, transformation also, to have some, let's say, single way to collect data, to have the right definition of the data, and to have these data ready for use by the statistician. That's the first point. Another point is about starting to have this cross-skilled or cross-expertise competence in the different groups. I am speaking about sensation also, but not only, to try to align this type of transformation of the system. And that's something very important. We are, in my standardization work, totally suffering from a lack of statisticians' participation, and we can see the limits today. So that's really something we need to improve. One other point is also to help people appropriate themselves the statistics, which means trying to have some harmonized common representations of some global common statistics so that people could progressively be familiar with and understand on the first look what is behind that. And that will also participate to trust, confidence, and having interest in the statistics. I think that's a few additional points to Markus.
So I want to focus on the trusted bit and getting beyond experimentation and pilots. So the question was really, what would be needed for the data to be trusted as official statistics? So I've got a number of points, some of which have already been covered. So there needs to be a shared common vision and understanding across all other partners. We need to have validated data quality. We need stability and reliability in the measurement, data handling and access. And that's not always easy with a lot of these technologies, which often have a very short lifespan. They might only be 5-6 years and they're gone. A lot of these companies will come and go. For example, if you were relying on Twitter data, Twitter could disappear in 5 years' time, right? There's loads of social media networks that have come and gone. You need transparency in the design and measurement, metadata and provenance. We need the compliance with standards, laws, regulations, and so on. I think there's a big piece of work to be done around governance, so agreed governance institutional arrangements over the long term, as in over 30, 40, 50 years, not over 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Need consistency across jurisdictions within and across states. So if you've got 101 municipalities who make up your city, they all need to be measuring things in the same way, using the same kinds of instruments, producing the same kinds of validated data and so on. Otherwise, you're going to have serious problems. And you need institutional capacity and resources and skilled labour. I think the key thing is if it's going to become official statistics data, you want to have confidence that you can have long term. Most official statistics are measured over tens of decades. They're not measured over months or years. So if they're going to become official statistics, then they have to have longevity. And that's difficult when you're dealing with technologies that are have a lot of churn and so on.
Thank you very much. Anastasios?
Thank you. More or less, I agree with what was already presented, said. My emphasis is on the standardization at the semantic level, what the signals mean, what the information conveys, and what are the units, what is the meaning of what we capture from the IoT devices. The second is the guarantees of quality. We cannot avoid noise, we cannot avoid errors. It is not something that you can control fully, but the sources should provide guaranteed level of quality. You should know the level of noise and the probability of errors. The third is traceability. At least traceability of the outliers. You should be able to identify which is the cause and which is the source of something that is extremely outlier. These are requirements for the incoming information. But in my opinion, it is equally important to develop new skills for the statisticians in order to handle this kind of data. You have to develop new mathematical models, models that take into account missing data. They allow variable confidence of the data. They can handle bias and selectivity problems, and they can automatically evaluate or validate the quality of methods. Because all these problems are apparently existing in data coming from IoT.
Thank you very much. This brings us to this end of this workshop, and I think an applause for that panel is in order. And I hope that this was inspiring for all of you. Looking at your faces, I think there is also sometimes a little bit of puzzlement. Where do we go from here? And a little bit of discomfort, which I also take as a very good sign, in particular when it comes to the official statistics community, because I think what we have heard over the past 1.5 days is that there is ample opportunity and probably high time for us to leave the comfort zone in terms of doing business as usual, but rather to engage in a new way of collaborating and a new way of working and a new way of doing statistics, which at the same time does not mean that we can dismiss our current operations. So indeed, this will be challenging times, and I think also what we have felt during these workshops, that we are not alone, that there are many potential and real partners by our side with whom we can walk this path together, and probably we have to walk this path together because alone we cannot cope with all this complexity and with the various data sources and the various challenges ahead. And I think from here now, we really need to invest to put things a little bit in order and to clarify what are the areas which we give priority at this stage to move forward in the European statistical system. And I think at least, well, I took a lot of messages here back home, and I hope you all did so as well, and then we can sleep it over a little bit and come back with some ideas how to take our manifold projects that exist already together in terms of integrate them further and in terms of moving forward on a common and hopefully successful agenda over the next months and years, so that we deliver on actually data that is mature for policy making based on the new data sources that exist and those which even not exist yet but may come in the future. So it's up to me now, and a great pleasure to thank you all. First of all, a big thanks goes to all the speakers during these 1.5 days. I think we had excellent contributions, and thank you very much for your wonderful talks and for the precious slides that will be put up on the cross portal during the next days, so you can share them with your colleagues and perhaps for further reflections and readings. Thank you very much. Another big thank you goes to Sogeti, which on our behalf has organized this conference, and I want to personally thank Alma Rutkowskiene and her team. You were not only a wonderful cook, I think we had great food during the last days, but also selected a very nice social event for us yesterday, and I think there were perfect logistics as far as I could experience this. And I explicitly would like to thank the technicians in the rooms for very nice live streaming. I had the opportunity to tap on it from time to time, and it was done very professionally. So thank you very much also for this, and thank you to Alma and your whole team for this wonderful organization. Finally, I would like to thank Kostas, who has organized that workshop together with Alma and who had the ideas for most of the presenters and the sequence of the events. Thank you very much, Kostas. So what I'm left with now is to remind you once more to please fill in the evaluation form and to wish you all a very safe trip back home. I have received some pictures of Luxembourg back home, where the snow is still quite high, and I'm looking forward to find my car covered under snow, presumably, and I hope you all have a good trip back home, wherever this may be, and then see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.